Okay, so the fairly recent, the Data Usage Barometer report, which was published, I think, by Fintech Circle in association with yourselves, bulk data centers, I think it found that the environmental impact for fintech organizations is quite important when it comes to deciding where to store their data. So perhaps you can just sort of tell us, what exactly you discovered.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the first thing to mention is the backdrop. Certainly in Europe, we are experiencing or have experienced the worst droughts in a very long time. So, which shines a massive spotlight on the physical impacts of climate change and the need to reduce emissions that creates it. And this has never been more apparent. So, at the same time, you've got the geopolitical situation that has happened over the last while. Which has given rise to a shortage in gas and a shortage in oil, which has seen the markets explode from a power security point of view, from a pricing point of view, and has driven the narrative on renewable energy, and that's really come to the fore. So that's kind of the backdrop and what's happened, and that is driving a very large focus on sustainability, and that's becoming an even more important driver for many firms, and increasingly central to the strategy of investing. So large pension providers and shareholders, it's a key part of their consideration. It's a key part of how they go about investing their funds in financial services companies or fintechs. Testament to that is the Net Zero Asset Managers Initiative, which is a pledge to decarbonize investment portfolios by 2050. And that was announced in December 2020, which is the signal that market sentiment is definitely shifting towards low carbon futures, undoubtedly. One of the key drivers is also regulation. So we're seeing, particularly in Europe, we're seeing regulation come to the fore, and taxonomy is sort of supporting that initiative as well. And this is very, very prevalent in the financial services community. So for energy-intensive companies like the financial services community, fintechs, algorithmic trading funds, quant funds, who all fall into that financial services bucket, this is really at the forefront of their minds, and they're getting onto the front foot, and they're really taking the initiative relative to this. They want to get ahead of the curve, and they want to be proactive in how they're going about sourcing power and how they're doing that sustainably. So cost, energy consumption, environmental impact, they're all linked. More energy means higher costs, and of course, greater environmental impact.
I guess the challenge they have, I mean, all industries have it to a certain extent, but as you sort of alluded to there, they are particularly reliant on, should we say, data intensive and energy intensive IT infrastructure. The major problem is that that's growing, if you like, the demand for that is growing at the same time as you're supposed to be reducing your carbon footprint. So how difficult or not is it for fintechs, and we're only in the infancy of AI, for example, which is potentially going to make another difference. So how can they sort of be sustainable and carry on, consuming more and more IT services? Yeah,
I mean, you've hit on one important topic, there being AI, but there's a subset of AI which is machine learning, and these are creating unprecedented, IT workloads. I just look at algorithmic trading, for example, within the hedge fund space. And they are doing a lot of quant analysis, a lot of R&D, a lot of calibration, and all of the ones and zeros, all the compute that's happening there is driving unprecedented workloads. I mean, we've seen, across the board and down to the survey we've done as well, in certain circumstances, about up to 20% of the companies that we've surveyed have said that they will have a 5x data increase over the next 3 years. I'm actually working with one or two companies that are seeing much larger than 5x growth. They seem closer to 10x growth over the next 3 years. So this is becoming a massive consideration for this, certainly for financial services and niches within financial services. Other respondents, over a third of the respondents predict that their data will grow by 50 to 100% over the next 3 years. So, this is all culminating in using tech in a way that gives much better outcomes to consumers and users alike, but at the same time is increasing data exponentially. And AI and ML are kind of the bedrock of that revolution within the financial services industry. So, this is becoming, they're using it in a way, these technologies are giving businesses the tools to process data, to better understand their organizations, their supply chains, their customers, as well as the wider sectors and the markets that they operate in.
So, as per the survey, fintechs, if you like, are aware of this issue, and I believe they're beginning to, or some of them at least, are beginning to explore alternatives to their current data storage infrastructure and, I guess, sort of long-term strategy. What does that look like? Because at the end of the day, you've got to store your data somewhere, and what are the nuances, if you like, as opposed to storing it, I know, in right next to where they may be trading in London, as opposed to somewhere. I mean, what are they looking at, if you like, in terms of making some changes?
Yeah, the first thing to mention is that there is no industry more reliant on high-performing, always-on data centers than fintech/stroke financial services, as they look to store and process an ever-growing volume of data on behalf of their customers and on behalf of their businesses. I think what they've done in particular is they've taken a real sort of microscope to the data that they are producing, and they've figured out that 95% of the data does not need to sit proximate, and it does not need to sit very close to where they're headquartered or where they have major hubs. So the things that are driving them internally are, the narrative internally is about sustainability, and it's about cost, and it's about power security. Those three things are very high on the agenda. So they're willing to look further afield to parts of the world that can cope with their data demands, that can deliver on their sustainability credentials, and that can reduce their cost. So our survey, for example, shows that most of the companies that we've spoken to, they've explored a plan to consider the alternatives, relative to their data storage infrastructure to meet those sustainability goals. Cloud, of course, is an option that will always continue to be a huge facilitator to these companies as well, particularly in concept development stage. But as that matures, as it gets into full production, these companies other considerations come into account. Data sovereignty comes into account, data security. How can I ensure that the data that I am consuming or generating actually the electrons are actually green electrons that are produced at source, rather than electrons that I'm buying via certificates. So this is becoming a massive consideration to them. And as I said, it's driven by sustainability, driven by lower cost. And where can I get the power? More importantly, how much runway can I get to protect my future demand? How can I scale and be guaranteed that I can scale in a location to protect my forecast for not just the next 5 years, but the next 10 years?
Okay, and in terms of their commitment, because I know been talking to other people recently, and there's a lot of greenwashing out there. But do you think there is a genuine commitment by these? I know they've got the slogan "fintech for good." Do you think there really now is a change, that there's a genuine commitment in the fintech space? They do want to reduce their carbon footprint. Yeah,
that's a great question. I think one of the things we saw from the report, one of the most important things we saw from the report we did, was that, and the report really illuminated this aspect, was that they're concerned about the environmental impact, but there's also a massive moral obligation to comply with, environmental or sustainability initiatives. So, there's a growing plethora of regulation that's coming through or coming down the line. So earlier this year, 1,300 of the largest UK registered companies and finance institutions became subject to the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. So TCFD is the abbreviation for that. And what this means is they've got to report and they've got to follow a similar trajectory to Japanese and New Zealand regulators relative to this. That mandate is going to be expanded in 2025. And even so, we're finding companies, companies of all sizes are voluntarily reporting. So they're actually going on the front foot, they're taking the initiative, and they're being proactive about what they're doing. And this growing awareness is reflected in the results of the survey that we conducted. And they need to meet current and future regulations on carbon emissions. With over 25% of them citing it's a key risk at company board level.
And in terms of yourselves, so bulk data centers, where do you fit into that? You've obviously carried out the survey, looked at the results. How do you fit into the what we call the fintech sustainability landscape? What's your sort of role in helping?
So I think it's important to say, bulk as a data center operator and provider, we are our expansion and our growth is centric to the Nordic region. The reason it's centric to the Nordic region is we have an abundance of renewable and available power, and we can get large amounts of land and we can get massive scale attached to that. The other thing is we can offer companies genuine cost benefits of relocating, non-latency sensitive data to a region that is very green in its energy production and at very low cost. So, the benefit for us is we've got an abundance of power, we've got plenty of runway in terms of scalability, large amounts of power, large amounts of land. We've got a climate that supports highly efficient data center operations. We've got flexibility around how we deploy, and we can accommodate many mechanical cooling technologies that make environments even more efficient and less carbon intensive. And we're getting into things like immersion cooling and direct liquid cooling, really bringing down the carbon intensity that is created by these environments. And of course, we've got very, very good heat reuse initiatives. Hydroponic farming, aquaponic farming, district heating initiatives are just three examples of the things that we sort of explore and how we can help companies to reduce their carbon load. So those innovative solutions are really resonating with the financial services community and fintechs. These are the core pillars and values of the bulk offering. So highly resilient, low-cost solutions, 100% carbon-free, much lower cost than our European counterparts.
And in terms of the industry, I mean, you say obviously the surveys reveal people are looking at alternatives, but I'm wondering, is there still a bit of a mental block for some companies? A lot of people traditionally, whether they were in the fintech space or not, wanted their data center within an hour's journey of whatever sort that was, just so they could get to the data center or whatever. So do you still find yourself having to persuade some people that moving it from the UK to the Nordics is going to be fine for them? Do they still mentally think, oh, it's a long way away? Just that sort of mental hurdle to overcome, if you like.
Yeah, I guess what you're describing there is that sort of server hugger mentality and having things proximate so that they can get to it. But I think what we've done in bulk is we've realised that this is going to be a consideration. We haven't turned a blind eye to that. We've created a concierge of services that makes support services that makes it easy for these organisations to get from a different market to the Nordics. So whether that is migration of existing kit or whether that is coincides with technology refreshes. Combined with that, we've made customs clearance and customs duty, incredibly easy. We have importer record status, so that immediately eliminates, subject to bulk being the consignee of goods, that immediately eliminates customs duty taxes when their kit arrives. And we're talking about tens of millions of pounds, even hundreds of millions of pounds, and so 25% customs duty can be, a significant cost to a business. That's not to say they couldn't recover it, but it might take them 12 months to recover it. That then becomes obviously a cash flow consideration. We immediately eliminate that, so we make it easy. And then, of course, we've got the 24/7 wraparound support services, and we can, ultimately create server-ready environments and then help customers rack and stack and set up. And one of the most recent examples we did with, algorithmic trading fund or a hedge fund is it was a complete remote installation in COVID. It happened in COVID, up to 3 megawatts of load, and they'd never seen the data center before. And we had shipped the kit out, cleared customs, fully racked and stacked. They logged it remotely, and their environment was up and running for a significant deployment. So we've taken the hassle away from customers, and we've also brought in the fiber and connectivity solutions to connect, diversely and very quickly back into their key markets. So we've really removed the barriers and hurdles and some of the consideration for these customers in that journey.
Okay, and in terms of the potential, is it I'm guessing we're still in fairly early days for this, so you're getting early adopters, and then you're anticipating as people realize, as you've just explained that example, it's not as stressful or problematic as they might be imagining. You anticipate quite a significant uptake in this kind of migration to yourselves and others in the Baltic regions.
Yeah, just over the course of the last 12 months, we've seen an uptick in pipeline, tens of megawatts, but hundreds of megawatts. And I'm not talking about any mining-related opportunities. I'm talking about enterprise-based opportunities coming from the financial services space, particularly algorithmic trading is showing just unbelievable, gigantic volumes of capacity requirements. Working with companies, looking at 10-year strategies, looking at runway over that length of time as well. We're talking up to 100 megawatts of capacity with, a day one commitment of 10 to 20 megawatts. So we're not talking about small volumes here, which is why we've gone about developing campuses that can cater to 10, 15-year scale opportunities. Our campus in Kristiansand, southern Norway, has up to 1 gigawatt's worth of power, and is set over 3 square kilometers of land. And over the course of the next 3 or 4 years, we'll be upping our capacity from 125 megawatts to plus 600 megawatts. So it shows you how we're thinking. That's driven by pipeline demand. It's driven by the customers we're talking to, their plans over the short, medium, and long term.
Okay, and maybe just as we finish, for folks that are looking at it, are there any key sort of things they need to consider? I mean, do you help people on the journey, or because they're the fintechs and they're potentially the experts, they know what needs to go where, or will you sort of work alongside them and, from the benefit of your knowledge, help them work out which applications, which workloads are sensible to migrate and which not? How does the journey work, I guess?
Yeah, I think particularly in the financial services space, what we're seeing is through our meetings and discussions and exploratory conversations that we're having with the community is that they are very educated on their data, and they're very educated on the workloads that they've got, and they're very educated on what is latency sensitive and needs to be proximate, and what isn't latency sensitive and doesn't need to be proximate. And they're aligning those workloads with sustainable and cost-effective solutions. And so, to a certain degree, that level of intelligence inside of that community makes that discussion much easier. We're not teaching them to understand their data better and to segment their data. They're doing that perfectly well anyway. And so if I think of the types of workloads that sit very well in the Nordic region, they are high-performance computing workloads attached to artificial intelligence and machine learning. Typically, how that manifests itself in the financial services space is, things like algorithmic trading, quant analysis, R&D, and we see overlap in those spheres in other industries, the manufacturing industry, the automobile industry. They have similar types of workloads, particularly R&D. If you look at the automobile industry, and crash test analysis is another type of workload. And then, simple things like in the retail financial services space, we've seen things like chatbots and help desk type applications that can sit anywhere. They don't need to be proximate. They're not latency sensitive. In fact, less than 5% of workloads in the financial services arena are latency sensitive. So 95% of those, the big compute, the big heavy lifting, can sit in regions that can cope with the sustainability and renewable energy demands at low cost.
Okay, so I mean, it sounds like the fintech space is now moving on its sustainability journey. Clearly, there are other benefits, and it looks as if it's a significant. It's not just a try it and see what happens. It's a big shift in their attitude, and to say sustainability is one of the biggest drivers. Yeah,
100% driven. This is driven in the boardroom. And so this is not an initiative that is from ground up, it's from top down, and aligned with investor sentiment as well. So there's this increasing, I wouldn't say pressure, but there's an increasing net that is starting to form, particularly, and I think financial services are taking the lead relative to this because they're doing it proactively. But regulation, taxonomy, investor relations, in getting more investors involved in your business means that you've got to be sustainable. You've got to be doing the right thing for the planet. And we see that message come through strongly in the financial services arena.
Okay, that's great. I mean, thank you for sharing some insights on the survey and what Bulk's up to. So really appreciate your time. Thanks again. Thank you.
Always